Welcome to the NFL Fantasy Football Show, presented by DraftKings. Here's your host, Marcas Grant.
What is up? Welcome to another edition of the NFL Fantasy Football Show, presented by DraftKings. It's me, your man, MG Marcas Grant, still masking and socially distancing when and where necessary. We got another great Wednesday show for you. We will go and, as we always do, have some wiretaps, those guys you picked up off the waiver wire that you may or may not be starting this week. Also have Adam ranked starts and sits, as we always do, plus a preview of the TNF game and NFC East matchup between the Giants and the Eagles. And, weirdly enough, there's still two teams that are in the playoff race, because that's just how the NFC East is. So we got that and plenty more to talk about on this show today. But before we dive into it, as we always do about this time, we'll talk to our faithful producer, Senior Edward L. Murphy, Esquire. And Murph, I heard you had sort of a banana mishap this morning. Is that correct?
A banana mishap. I'm a very routine-based person. So obviously before we record the show and we have a lot of stuff going on here, I do the same breakfast: egg whites, banana. Unfortunately, the banana was too brown. I don't like the organic brown bananas. I have to throw them out because it gets mushy, and I'm actually allergic to bananas. And weirdly, the more brown it is, the more it hurts my mouth. So I have to toss them. Just a waste of money. The shelf life is way too short with these bananas.
Yeah, that's the problem with bananas, is that they have zero shelf life, and especially when it's warm. And I know it's been warm in LA. They ripen even faster. I'm sort of the opposite. I can't eat really unripe bananas. I can sort of eat them when they get a little browner, but I can't do the green ones because it just sort of makes me nauseous.
Yeah, the green ones are also weird. This is a very fine line with which bananas are good to eat, but it's I'm trying to stay healthy as possible during this quarantine. Obviously, gyms and stuff aren't open. It's no bananas. Now I'm going to be hungry the rest of the day. I don't want to snack on any bad stuff. So rough start in the morning. It
is not a good start to the day. Hopefully the rest of your day gets a little bit better after we get through the early morning period. Yeah, there you go. All right, it is Wednesday, which means we bring in our pal Adam Rank to help us through the day. I know he's going to have his starts and sits a little bit later. You didn't have any fruit-related misfortune this morning, did you?
It was weird on Big Brother on, Tuesday night? Cody was talking about how he hates bananas, and if I was on the final jury, I would vote against him just for that. I think he's played the most flawless game. Oh, there's my headphones. I think he's played the most flawless. Sorry, I've been looking for my earbuds all day, and I'm yelling at my daughter what did you do with them? And I'm like, no, they're over here. I'm so sorry. So Ahsoka Tano Rank, I apologize to you. She's downstairs yelling. She knows she's happy in her heart. But I was surprised that he hates banana. I guess it's weird because I'm not an eggs person, and it's not like a political statement. I just don't enjoy it, and I always think it's the weirdest thing when people are like, why don't you like this? If somebody went up to Eddie, how do you not like bread? Bro, it's it's not like I choose this. I don't choose what foods I like or dislike. It's up to my taste buds. Yell at my tongue if you want to. It's not my, I would love to love eggs. My life would be way easier. I'm the worst guy to go to breakfast with because I'm not the eggs guy. Just give me the kielbasa or whatever. But you got to do what you got to do. You got to move forward. I'm glad that Eddie was able to get through that, though.
Kielbasa is a pretty good substitute, though, for people who don't like eggs.
For sure.
If you got to make the choice, then that's not a bad way to go. All right, let's choose to go and do some fantasy headlines right now. Talk about some of the big news that's going to affect fantasy football. The biggest one, you can probably see it over my shoulder. It is Tua Time. In Miami, the Dolphins have decided they are going to make the rookie Tua Tagovailoa their starting quarterback for the rest of the season, at least presumably for the rest of the season. And props to you, Adam Rank, because you sort of called this a couple of weeks ago on this show. You said that after the bye, when they start the Rams, that is a good time to get Tua in there. So he's in. The question is he worth an ad on fantasy rosters?
Well, I do believe that he's worth a speculative ad if you have some room, if you have an extra roster spot, if you have a guy that you've been hanging on to and you look at and you're like, why am I still holding on to this player? Then I would go out and do it. I'm not usually a huge advocate of carrying a couple of quarterbacks, but I think that he's got enough upside that unless you're absolutely loaded at the position, if you have Patrick Mahomes, obviously Russell Wilson, you probably don't need to make that move. But I do think that he's worth an ad, and I do think, again, this makes sense for the Dolphins. I know that we all love Ryan Fitzpatrick, but even though they're 3-3, did you really feel they were on the same level as the Chiefs and the Steelers and the Ravens? Make this move. Let's have some exciting thing. I'm kind of excited about what this means to the rest of their players, because I think that we could see an uptick for a number of their skill guys.
I think that's sort of the big question. I think part of the reason, at least us fantasy geeks wanted to see Fitzpatrick stay in there, was just for the consistency of it, is that we sort of know what we have already. And, if you're starting Devontae Parker or Mike Gesicki, Preston Williams, what have you, you just sort of want that comfort food of knowing that Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be able to get the ball to your guys. We don't like change. We don't like uncertainty. And that's sort of what this thing does. As a football fan, I'm excited to see Tua. I just want to see the guy go out there and see what he can do. He brings a new element to this offense. I know we always joke about Ryan Fitzpatrick being the leading rusher for the Dolphins last year, but running is not necessarily the strong suit of his game. You get some extra mobility back there with Tua. So I'm very curious to see how this sort of thing works. But you did talk about...
Are you worried? Are you worried about Myles Gaskins? His value going down? Like, it's going to go up.
I see. That was my question, is what happens to the rest of these guys? I mean, you have a quarterback who runs. Is he going to dump the ball off to Myles Gaskin, or is he just going to take off and run? I mean, what does this mean for the rest of their skill position guys?
I think that it makes the offense far more dynamic. They're going to get more first downs, which means there's going to be more opportunity to be on the field. I know it's fun to watch Ryan Fitzpatrick go out there and do his thing, but he still threw a lot of interceptions. He turned the ball over. I think Tua is one of these guys that we've seen come into the league over the last couple of years who can really make an offense sing. I would even equate it. I mean, we don't have to go far, Marcus. Let's look at Los Angeles. And Tyrod was a player that we love, very safe option, but look at how much better the Chargers have been since Justin Herbert has taken over as the starting quarterback. And now you've got Tua, who a couple of years ago, after his freshman season, people were, if that would have been the NBA, he would have been the first overall pick in the draft. So I think this makes it more dynamic, and I think this is going to be nothing but a boon for that Dolphins offensive skill set, and especially Myles Gaskin. I do have a lot of shares of Myles Gaskin, and I really do believe that he's going to be a huge benefactor. He's not scoring a lot of touchdowns anyways, so it's not like, oh my gosh, this guy's scoring 8 touchdowns a game, now he's going to get none. It's like, no, he does all his work between the 20s. I think there's going to be more opportunity to move the ball in between the 20s.
All right, I'm going to take your word for it. I'm going to just kind of relax and sort of watch
things. Look at me. Why are you so morose? You're a Dodgers fan. You guys just won the World Series last night. That thing's a joke. First of all, that series is a joke. Just stop it now. You should be so happy. Cody Bellinger is now like a good player all of a sudden because he was awful in the playoffs. Kershaw didn't light the house on fire. That's the thing. Can I say one thing about Clayton Kershaw? I love that everybody was complaining, like, why are they pulling him out? I'm like, bro, just because the toddler hasn't burned the house down, you still take the matches out of their hand. That was the smartest thing that Dave Roberts has ever done, which I know is a short bar. Like, you're not making a huge leap. But anyways, I'm sorry. I derailed it once again. Sorry. Sorry, Ryan. Eddie.
Since we're on this topic, I mean, one, it was a smart move to pull him out because you just don't want to see him go through the lineup another time, especially once you had a 7-run lead at that point. That made sense. The other part is I'm really sick of all my friends who are not Dodger fans going out of their way to try and jinx everything by already gifting them the World Series title.
There's nothing I can do.
I've had enough.
There's nothing I can do. And by the way, as an Angels fan, listen, our life sucks. And it's not fun. Okay, we never win anything. The last time we made the playoffs was 2014. I'm sitting there minding my own business, watching Big Brother, and then I have to go online and start defending Mike Trout. I'm like, everybody stop with your nonsense. Like, listen, we're not as a team, we don't make the playoffs. But Mike Trout is like the Angels don't make the playoffs. That's a fact. Mike Trout is the best player in baseball. Also a fact. Why are we arguing either one of these things?
You know what? I want to see Mike Trout succeed. I like watching him. He's a fun player.
He succeeds. He's really good. Like, there's
that's true.
Nothing he can do.
The guys around him don't succeed as often as they probably should. All right. Speaking of succeeding, Raheem Mostert was having some success in San Francisco, but now it looks like he's going to the injured reserve as he's got an ankle injury, so he's going to be out for at least the next few weeks. So, which Niners running back would you prefer to have on your roster and start this week against the Patriots?
Well, I'm going to get to one of my sits this week. It's going to be a 49ers running back. But the one player I would talk about is JaMycal Hasty. And I know you mentioned him on Fantasy Live on Tuesday. He's gotten a little bit of buzz previously, but I really do believe that he looks like the most dynamic guy when he gets an opportunity to run. The problem is, and it's always going to be the situation with the 49ers, is that Jerick McKinnon is there. And Wilson has been battling an ankle injury as well. But look at the juice. Like, you look at this, like, that's... All right, he bounces off that hit right there. That's not a bad play. That was a good Rams team, by the way, that they beat. He catches the ball out of the backfield, and I think this is the run. That's nice. Listen, I don't sit there and call my friend and be like, dude, you got to see this 10-yard run, but like, that's impressive. Like, if you gain 10 yards every time you touch the football, like, you're going to be playing in the NFL for a long time. Like, changes direction right there pretty well. So I think that he's got the best opportunity. The only problem is this week he's going up against the New England Patriots. They've allowed the fifth fewest fantasy points to running backs this season. So I do believe that they're going to probably try to make Jimmy Garoppolo throw the football a little bit. So I'm kind of staying away from the 49ers running backs, but I would pick up JaMycal Hasty if he's still available here on Wednesday morning.
Yeah, that does make sense. I mean, look, the pecking order, I think, of Niners running backs that you kind of want to look at is look for Jerick McKinnon. Chances are he's probably gone in most leagues, but if he's there, I think he's probably the number one guy. I like Hasty as the number two option if you're looking for Niners running backs. Jeff Wilson, I'm waiting to see what his status is. He missed last week with a calf injury, so they're not sure what his status is going to be this week, so that's one to keep an eye on. The only thing about this is we're going to talk about all these guys, and what's going to happen is that Tevin Coleman is going to come back and upset the apple cart and get like 10 carries for 17 yards and really just frustrate all of us. But in the short term, I like what Hasty has to offer. I remember people asking me about him, mostly Dynasty League folks, back in July and August, asking me about JaMycal Hasty. And I thought, at that point, he was sort of buried on the depth chart. He was a practice squad guy. But the way the injuries have gone, he's getting his opportunity. And I think he's at least sort of worth an ad, at least for the next week or two. And then, we'll figure it out once we get beyond week 7. Other running back news, the Chiefs, we know, have already brought in LeVeon Bell. The expectation is he's going to play for them coming up this next week. Now, according to Jay Glazer, he believes that they brought in Bell not to be a starter, but mostly to take some of the workload out of Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's hands. So does this at all change how you feel about this Kansas City backfield?
Yeah, I do believe that once the initial shock and dread of being a manager with Clyde Edwards-Hilaire and just seeing Le'Veon Bell there, you're like, like it's, we post the Jeremy Piven meme, Ari Gold, I should say. And we have fun with it, and everybody, has their consternation. And it's funny enough, I did film a PSA about this, but to give you the longer form view of this, it kind of strikes me similar to what the Browns have done or what they were trying to do this year with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, where you could have two running backs who could be effective for you this season. And I think Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, as much as we wanted him to be a workhorse, number one running back, he was really going to fall into the RB2 role. And I think a big reason why is he's not great around the goal line. We saw that in week 1. We were kind of, trying to dismiss it because we wanted him to succeed so much. But I think ultimately he's going to be a guy who's going to get a lot of yards in between the 20s. I don't believe that there's any running back who's had as many scrimmage yards or many rushing yards. I know if he's not first, he's amongst the leaders. So that's not going to change. They're going to bring in Le'Veon Bell in pass pro, probably near the goal line. So I see Bell as a flex guy, but I think Clyde Edwards-Hilaire is going to be the guy that you're going to count on. Again, I mean, what are your alternatives? Are you going to start LaMichael Pirine? You're going to go with Malcolm Brown? Going to go with JaMycal Hasty? Actually, we were just talking about him. That guy's not bad. But I mean, what are your options? Like, if you have an embarrassment of riches at that running back position to where you are going to be making a decision whether you're starting Clyde Edwards-Hilaire every week or not, then congratulations, you're probably going to win your league. But I think he's going to be effective. And that number that you see right there on the screen, 11 fantasy points, get used to it. That's a comfortable number. I'm happy with that. Like, that's what it is. That's why, you might have spent too much for it. It's like when you buy food from a food truck. You're like, this is a good burrito. I don't know that it was worth $20, but it's a good burrito.
I think what happens to us when we start analyzing these players is that suddenly, a door opens and we sort of forget, what the evaluation of the player was to begin with, right? I mean, because at the beginning of the year, I think we were all sort of expecting that this was going to be a two-headed attack, right? It was going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Damian Williams. Damian Williams opts out. CEH suddenly becomes the lead running back, and we all kind of lose our minds, like forgetting that look, there was a reason that we thought he was going to be in a rotation in the first place. Like if he was that great that he was just going to walk in and immediately be a 25 carry a game back, they would have made him that from the beginning. There wouldn't have been this battle between him and Damian Williams. So I think sometimes we sort of lose our heads because we see an opportunity in front of us. And I think this is just sort of reminding us, this is taking us back to where we were on Clyde Edwards-Helaire in July and August again, and reminding us of, look, not that he's a bad player, but obviously the Chiefs have some other plans for him. They aren't ready for him to be just a full workhorse back. So I think after the initial shock, I think you're right. We've all sort of calmed down a little bit. We've kind of gotten the panic out, and we can just move on, right? Because the thing is that the other part of this is I was telling somebody the other day, LeVeon Bell as a part-time player in an Andy Reid offense, I think is still better than LeVeon Bell as a full-time player in an Adam Gase offense. I think either way, you still win.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that is the thing. And this is the thing. You also have a ticket to the hottest show, the hottest offense in the NFL. Now, at first, when we bought the Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we thought we were going to be in the pit. But now we're we're a couple rows back on the loge, but we're still at the show, baby. So you know what? I'm going to live it up. I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to go to the beer line. I'm going to get a couple of cervezas, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to have fun. I'm going to enjoy it as I'm stumbling like I'm drinking already. But no, I'm not. It's coffee. I guarantee it. But no, I think we're going to be fine. Like, everybody chill out. We're good. Start them this week against Denver.
Right, wait, there you go.
Denver.
Start them against Denver.
Yeah.
Start them against Denver. Hey, today's show is brought to you by DraftKings, a leader in one-day fantasy sports. DraftKings has millions of dollars in total prizes up for grabs this week, so download the DraftKings app now. Use code TEAM during sign-up and start feeling the sweat like never before. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. Come back, we will give you our rookie running back report card. 3 guys at the midway point of the fantasy regular season. We'll let you know how we feel like they're doing. Stay tuned for more of the NFL Fantasy Football Show presented by DraftKings. Okay, so we are through 6 weeks of the NFL regular season, which is just about the halfway point for the fantasy regular season. So I think it was a good time to look at some of the rookie running backs and sort of give our grades on how we think they're doing. Now, I left James Robinson out because at this point he's a top 10 running back. That feels like an A++. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been fantastic. We talked about him. He feels like he's going to get a pretty universally good grade. But I picked 3 guys who have been sort of kind of middle of the pack in terms of their production versus maybe what we expected from them. And so I kind of want to get a feeling on how we are thinking about these guys now. First one is Jonathan Taylor, who there were big expectations for him. And sort of like we talked about with CEH, right? When Marlon Mack went down, the thought was Jonathan Taylor was just going to take over this backfield and do huge things for the Colts. That hasn't really happened so far this season. So through week 6, what grade are you giving JT?
I mean, I guess a C. I don't know. Because again, Marcus, this goes back to our own perception and the expectations we put upon him. Like, we should have lowered those expectations. It's kind of like when I went to go see the movie Skyscraper. I lowered my expectations because I had just seen The Rock in what could quite possibly be the greatest movie of all time. And of course, I'm talking about San Andreas. So I go into Skyscraper with lowered expectations, and I got to be honest with you, it was fantastic, and I enjoyed every minute of it. But I had those lowered expectations, and I feel that if I had a realistic view of Jonathan Taylor coming into the season, I would be encouraged by the production that I'm getting. But you know what? I kind of oversold it in my mind a little bit. Thought he was going to be getting more production. I thought he was going to catch more passes out of the backfield. So it's a C, but it's because I'm a teacher and I'm grading it too hard on my own personal bias and not necessarily on his value or production or anything, as I'm knocking on wood, apparently.
I'm willing to give him a B plus. I mean, he has sort of produced, maybe not to the level we would have thought. And maybe I'm being too generous. Where if you're being a little bit too tough, Rank, I think maybe I'm being a little bit too generous with the B plus there. I thought he'd have some more big breakout games. He only has one 100-yard rushing game so far this season. He actually has a couple of games where he's had as many or more receiving yards than rushing yards. So he's doing things. He's getting opportunities. I'm still waiting for that huge breakout game for him. But I think on the whole, he's been okay. I mean, he's still a top 15 running back in most formats. So I'm willing to sort of give him the benefit of the doubt, especially with an offense that has been as inconsistent as the Colts. So I'll give him a slight edge and give him a B plus on this one. Next one is DAndre Swift, who really had sort of kind of been missing in action, it feels like, until this past week when, reports came that Matt Patricia had to win that game. Otherwise, he could be fired. Then all of a sudden, they give DAndre Swift all this work. He has over 100 yards. He has 2 touchdowns. So, taking that all into account, what grade are you giving him?
Well, I think based on one game, it would be an A, but I think overall it's a C. It's like when I was, the first year I was in junior high and I was taking a history class, I got a C, I got a B my first semester in history and I was like, I don't understand. In the first quarter, I got a C, and the second quarter, I got an A, and the teacher surmised like, oh, you split the difference. I'm like, bro, I'm trending up. Give me the A. And then my teacher was like, it's junior high, guy. Like, you're going to be fine. Like, don't worry. Like, if you're getting this twisted over it. And I think that's what we're talking about with DAndre Swift is like, we shouldn't worry about what happened early in the season. He dropped a potential winner against the Bears. He had some other problems. They started going to Adrian Peterson. But I think this is trending up to a player that could be an A. Like, if they make this commitment to him and really go forward giving the ball to DAndre Swift. And I know a lot of people will come out and they'll be like, well, he's a Belichick guy, and that means that every week it could change. But remember when Sony Michel was doing things in his rookie year, they stuck with him. And I really do believe that if Matt Patricia enjoys coaching the Detroit Lions, he might not, so I don't know, don't ask me. But if he enjoys coaching the Detroit Lions, he's going to give the ball to DAndre Swift moving forward.
I completely agree with the grade. I'm giving him a C as well. Although I think some of it is just that they weren't giving him the proper tools to be successful, namely, giving him the ball. The fact is they kept going to Adrian Peterson early in the year. They have slowly started to give him more opportunities. He was catching the ball down near the goal line. So that was certainly a positive there. And then this past week, we saw him get a good number of carries, have the yardage, get in the end zone. So maybe now they're starting to see that he can be successful if given the right opportunities here. So he is trending up. I think if we had done this a couple of weeks ago, this would have been maybe a D or worse for DAndre Swift. So he's going in the right direction. I think it's going to get better. But right now, he's just been average. He has not been as advertised or what we thought he could be. But I think the tide is turning for DAndre Swift. The last one is Cam Akers. And there was, I didn't know what to make of Cam Akers in this Rams backfield at the start of the season. I kept saying that I went after Darrell Henderson because he seemed like he's sort of like that mid-shelf whiskey, right? It's like that intersection of affordability and quality. And that's kind of how I felt about Darrell Henderson. Cam Akers, we just haven't seen much of him. He was hurt. Then last week, he just didn't get the ball, didn't get on the field a whole lot. So, at this point, what are we feeling about Cam Akers?
No, I think you're absolutely right. It kind of reminds me when you go to Trader Joe's and you can spend $30 on bullet bourbon, or else you can get Rebel Yell for like $9 or whatever it is. Like, that's what I should have done because I bought in to Cam Akers and it's been an F or a D. I don't know. I mean, perhaps, we should have gone into this situation listening to Sean McVay, who was very effusive in his praise of the way Kyle Shanahan was dealing with his running backs. And we should have gotten the clue that none of these guys were going to be, well, I mean, Darrell Henderson's actually been pretty good, but realize that this was going to be something that was going to be in flux. They were going to take 3 guys to replace Todd Gurley. So Cam Akers to me, and I think that this really comes down to just watching him at Florida State. And of course the joke of like, he knows how to play behind a bad line, but the Rams line has been playing very well this season. And Cam Akers through injuries or whatever it is, hasn't been able to take advantage. So this is not even a passing grade because you made the NFL and didn't get cut. So I guess I can't give you an F. You're in the league, so that's pretty cool. But you're not going to be fantasy relevant. Even when he has his first breakout game, it's going to be one of those things that we're all going to be apprehensive about because it just feels like this Rams offense is not trustworthy.
I'm gonna give him an incomplete on this one, just because he just hasn't really been around. I mean, he missed a couple of weeks with an injury. Then, he comes back and he has an okay game against Washington. Then we hear that he's going to get more opportunity against the 49ers, except I think he played one more snap than you and I in that game against San Francisco. So he just hasn't really been there so far this year. So I can't really give him a full and true grade on this one. I'm still waiting to see what happens. But
Wait a minute.
With you.
Wait a minute. If you were in school and you were truant from class, would your teacher be like, oh, no, it's okay? You weren't here. Like, no, you have to be there to do the work. That's part of it. Listen, I didn't know we could take the cop out and just be like incomplete. No, give him a grade. Letter grade right now.
Okay, then if I'm giving him a letter grade, it is a D. Like, that's it. Like, I'm with you. It's a D because he's been missing. Although I think there's at least excused absences. I mean, we knew where he was. Like, he didn't just ditch and go to the movies or anything like that. But it has not been good. And I'm with you. Like, if he does have that big game, we're all going to sort of look at one, nobody's going to take advantage of it because nobody's going to be starting Cam Akers by that point. But also we're going to look around and we're going to be like, yeah, this was really nice, but next week it'll probably be the Malcolm Brown game. We're going to go back to Darrell Henderson. We're just not going to trust it. So far, I mean, there's still, a lot of time left to go in the regular season, the NFL regular season. But so far, Cam Akers has been, I think, one of the bigger rookie disappointments that we have seen this year. And you're right, Sean McVay sort of told us that. But I think we lost trust in Sean McVay because last year he kept trying to tell us that Todd Gurley wasn't hurt, and we were all watching it. We're like, Todd Gurley actually is kind of hurt, dude. Like,
but he was still good. Like, Todd Gurley was still good last year. Like, I would take last year's Todd Gurley in an instant this season.
So with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
That is neither here nor there. All right, inspired by ongoing conversations with players, the NFL Players Association, and Players Coalition together launched NFL Votes to empower and improve our communities through exercising the right to vote. Join the NFL family by registering to vote today and make your voice heard this November. Visit NFL.com/votes to learn more. Come back, we will look at the TNF game, Giants and Eagles in Philadelphia, next on the NFL Fantasy Football Show. Now it's time for the Home Field Advantage presented by Brotherly Grub. We're helping promote local Black-owned businesses around the nation. So we're going to dive into Giants and Eagles on Thursday Night Football. And if you're in Philadelphia, be sure to check out Brotherly Grub. So I know on the surface, this is not an exciting matchup. It's a pair of teams that have a combined 2 wins between them, but they are both very much in the hunt for the NFC East title because that's just how the NFC East is so far this year. But on the field, it has been a frustrating year for Evan Engram and anybody who drafted him in fantasy. But considering the Eagles have struggled defensively against opposing passing games, is this kind of a make or break week for Evan Engram for your fantasy team?
Yeah, like how long do I have to keep going on with this? Like it is the tight end equivalent of Kenyon Drake come on, man. Like this, how often do like every time there is a plus matchup and you think this is going to be it? It never materializes. It's, I guess it's all the Superman movies they've made over the last number of decades, ever since Christopher Reeve knocked it out of the park. You're like, they can't mess this one up. Although I will say that the animated Superman Red Sun is excellent. So animated, fine, but like live action, it hasn't been great. So I'm starting Evan Engram because I don't know if you've seen the tight end position. Unless you picked up Dallas Goedert today. But, yeah, I'm out. I mean, I got to start him, but I want to be out eventually.
Yeah, I think if it doesn't happen this week, then I'm fully out. I thought a couple weeks ago against the Cowboys was going to be a chance for him, but I think he had a rushing touchdown and he had 16 receiving yards, and, that was it. So that sort of like put me on the outs with him. But this is it. This is really, really the final straw with Evan Engram. Like if it doesn't happen against Philadelphia, I think I'm sort of out. By the way, I've seen Superman Returns just sitting there in the things you might like on Netflix, and like I'm tempted to go back and watch it and hope that maybe it isn't as boring as I thought it was the first time around. I don't know if you have any.
I will say that Man of Steel I like better because the way it plays into Batman versus Superman, which is another movie that I liked. I will tell you that Justice League didn't hold up, but Batman versus Superman was good. And I don't care who you are, and you can come at me and do whatever you got to do, but it does make me like Man of Steel a little bit better. And it's got the K-Dog, so I always got to represent Cal State Fullerton. So how bad was it really? So that's a terrible analogy. Forgive me. I was reaching. It's early in the morning on the West Coast. I've been looking for my earbuds all morning. It's been a tough go of it.
I understand. I do. I understand. But by the way, you're right. The animated DC stuff is a whole lot better than the live action stuff, no doubt. Okay, so choose your fighter. You got to start one of these receivers in this game. Who's it going to be? Darius Slayton or Travis Fulgham?
Man, I would really love, like, no joke. I would like both these guys to be on in my lineup. I have no hesitation, although I do believe Sterling Shepard is getting close to getting back. I'm going to obviously check the injury reports and everything. But I like Fulham. I think that he's played really well, and he's somebody that I believe in. And that even though they're starting to talk about Alshon Jeffrey or Deshaun, whoever it is, like I forget the Eagles receive, like whatever guy, like yes, you're like it's like when you see me hitting maybe on an Evite, back in the day. Like people would be like, okay, Rank, you're not showing up, but thanks for at least taking the time to acknowledge that you sort of care about what's going on. But I think Travis has been fantastic. And I think that this is going to end up being one of those guys that you can count on week to week. I mean, he's been doing this against some, what you would think are tough matchups and still playing pretty well. So now he's got the Giants. This is, of course, when he has 4 points. But I think I'm going to go with Travis in this one.
I agree. I think I'm going to go Fulgham in this one, in part because the Giants, their passing game has just been sort of hit or miss. But regardless of what's happened with the Eagles, Travis Fulgham has balled out. I mean, over the last couple of weeks, he's actually the wide receiver 3. He's had touchdowns in 3 games in a row. And I'm not so worried about what happens to him when Deshaun Jackson comes back, which could be Thursday, or when Alshon Jeffrey comes back, which might be never. I have no idea what's going on with Alshon Jeffrey, to be honest with you. So I think he's earned that opportunity. I think he's gotten the trust of Carson Wentz, and I would feel okay with having him in my lineup, at least as a flex, maybe as a wide receiver too, starting on Thursday night. But speaking of Carson Wentz, if you follow the Philly beat writers and the people who are watching this team, very, very closely, they've made the point that Carson Wentz the last couple of weeks has been better than advertised. So is it safe to maybe go back and trust him if you have a quarterback issue this week?
I know a lot of people are already starting to get Jalen Hurts into their DFS lineups and things like that, which is amazing. I don't like the disrespect for Carson Wentz. I think he's playing really well given the circumstance. Having to play with a cast of seemingly anonymous wide receivers. It's like if they would have made Ocean's 11 and it was George Clooney and 10 other dudes from some high school drama department. Probably wouldn't be as good. I'm just saying. But he's gone out there and he's played well. And then everybody had given up on them against the Ravens last week. And he rallied them and got them back into a position to possibly tie, perhaps go on to win that game. And so I think given the degree of difficulty, and I say this because, I had a lot of high expectations coming in for Philly this year, the Carson Wentz is going to play pretty well down the stretch. He's done it before. I think that they'll eventually get to the 500 mark. He's going to start crushing it. It turns out, though, that guards are an important part of a football team. And so we saw last year what happened to Cleveland. I know the Bears have had some injuries on the offensive line. I see how that helps, or hurts, I should say. And I think the Eagles are going through the same thing right now. So I trust them. And then this is the Giants. You should go out there and put up 300 on this team.
This is making me feel better because at the start of the year, I was very much on this. Carson Wentz is a sleeper quarterback, and he has top 5 upside. And I think people sort of looked sideways at it because the last couple of years haven't been particularly great. And then he got off to a really bad start this year, and I sort of had to kind of Homer Simpson back into the bushes on that one a little bit. But look, you look at his number. He actually has 4 rushing touchdowns this year, which is something I don't think we've talked about. He's had 20 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. He is starting to turn around. It's not pretty. Like people who love the Law, Sausage, and Carson Wentz fantasy points should watch neither one of them being made because it's just not pretty. But it's effective. And so I think maybe you're right. Maybe he's starting to turn it around. Getting some guys healthy will definitely help his cause. But he's found some receivers he can trust. Dallas Goedert is coming back. That's going to be a big help as well. So maybe it was a little too soon to give up on Carson Wentz, and maybe things are going to get better. So I'm starting to kind of buy back in on my original take from the summer.
Dallas Goedert, okay. The savior of the season is Dallas Goedert. By the way, can I say one thing though?
Sure.
And listen, I'm not Daniel Jeremiah, but I'm allowed to do a mock draft every year about what teams should do. Listen, this year I was kind of good. And I told the Eagles, draft Justin Jefferson, and they just did not want to listen to me. They're like, we got to go with Jalen Reagor. And I don't want to be the TCU receiver guy, am I right? But Justin Jefferson was playing in a pro offense with a professional, I know they're all paid, but like a professional level offensive coordinator in Joe Brady, who of course is now in Carolina. Why wouldn't you make that move? Why do you watch film and watch these really good teams and be like, no. We don't want the receiver from this really excellent team that's been winning national championships. Let's go for the Big 12 receiver and see how that works out.
And that's another dude who, like, if we were doing rookie wide receiver report cards, he would have gotten an incomplete because, like, where has he been?
F. He's not here. He gets the F. No all incompletes. Right. F.
All right. He didn't show up to class, so I guess he gets an F. All right. That was Home Field Advantage presented by Brotherly Grub. One person's fight is never just one person's fight. It takes all of us to fight cancer. Join the NFL and the American Cancer Society in the fight today by talking to your doctor or reminding a loved one about getting screened. Visit NFL.com/crucialcatch to learn more. It'll be time for starts and sits for Week 7 when we come back on the NFL Fantasy Football Show. It's time for Secure Starts presented by Visa for peace of mind online. Visa's got you covered. So Adam Rank, as always, has his starts and sits for the week. Started the quarterback, Justin Herbert, after a week off. He's back in our lives now.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope it's not a situation where you walk away from a hot streak and it never materializes once again. But this was one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy before he took a bye. He was the QB8, averaging close to 22 fantasy points per game. And as a matter of fact, he scored at least 22 in 3 out of his last 4. He's got a great matchup this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, my friends down in Duval County. They've allowed 24 fantasy points on average to quarterbacks in 3 of their last 5 games. So we're going with Herbert. And we're also going to start Matthew Stafford. And I understand that anytime Matthew Stafford has a plus matchup, it always comes off like a television show that your friends recommend on Netflix. Like, hey, you got to watch this show. And they build it up so much and it never materializes. But there's no way that I can bench him against the Atlanta Falcons, who have allowed the most fantasy points per game this season to quarterbacks, close to 30 points per game. They've allowed every quarterback this season to score over 20 fantasy points. Although I should say 5 of 6 games. The one game that they didn't allow a quarterback to go over 20 was when they played the Bears, and Foles and Trubisky combined for 28 fantasy points. So Matthew Stafford, if you've been holding on to him or whatever it is, make sure you're starting him.
Did you know that growing up, Matthew Stafford played baseball with Clayton Kershaw? I'm the first person to ever report this fact.
Why don't people talk about that more?
No one ever talks about this sort of thing. So I'm glad I can educate the people on that. Running backs, who are you looking at starting this week?
Well, I'm going to go with Ronald Jones. He's been incredibly successful over the last couple of weeks, continuing to consistently put up positive fantasy points. He has had at least 15 in 3 consecutive games per game. He's touched the ball 20 times. See what happens when you get an opportunity to go out there, you can put up fantasy points. He's playing the Las Vegas Raiders this season, who've allowed the second most fantasy points to running backs. And I understand this is like a hot streak in blackjack. And at some point it's going to come crashing down, but I'm doubling down every time until I get that bus card. I also like James Conner this week against the Tennessee Titans, a battle of two of the best teams in the AFC. The good thing about Conner, and he was kind of overlooked at fantasy drafts this season, but he's had at least 15 fantasy points in 4 consecutive games, like Ronald Jones, getting to touch the ball an awful lot. Him coming in just over 18 per game over the last 4. And the Titans have allowed the 7th most rushing yards to running backs this season. So we look at this game and we think it's going to be one of the best of the weekend, if not the best. But I'm getting James Conner in there for sure.
I would like for the Steelers to, if I have James Conner, I'd like for them to stop giving the ball to Chase Claypool on the goal line.
Yeah, he's a vulture. He's the goal line vulture now.
Just let him run it in, please. That's all I want. Wide receiver, which 2 guys are you big on this week?
I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin, and it's been disappointing watching him a little bit with Washington FT. They seem like they're misusing his talents, kind of like if you had Gordon Ramsay selling tacos at Taco Bell. You'd be like, what? Couldn't you do a little bit more with your talents? I mean, these Doritos Locos tacos are excellent, but I want a little bit more. But Terry McLaurin has gotten at least 11 fantasy points in 5 of 6 games. His 28% target share is 4th most in the NFL. And of course, he's going up against the Dallas Cowboys, who give up a ton of fantasy points. I don't know if they're ready to pack it in. I think that this is a game where the Cowboys rise back up. We saw it with the 49ers last week. I think this is that game for the Cowboys, but I'm still comfortable enough starting Terry McLaurin. And hey, everybody, it's an OBJ game. Where's the bell? OBJ game. We can start him this week. Obviously, this is not somebody that we're going to trust week in and week out, but the last time he played the Cincinnati Bengals, he had close to 18 fantasy points. And the Bengals have allowed they've allowed 5 top 20 fantasy wide receivers in the last 4 games. So I look at this one as being a shootout, a lot of points being scored, and a lot of opportunity to get Odell Beckham Jr. in your lineup.
Yeah, it's been hit or miss with OBJ, but he's become a matchup-based guy, and this looks like a pretty good matchup. At the tight end spot, you're keeping the Browns' love rolling, huh?
Well, absolutely. And I think a lot of people avoided Austin Hooper this year because for the obvious reasons of that Browns offense is going to be run heavy. You had 2 stud running backs to start the year. You had OBJ, Jarvis Landry. So, Austin Hooper was probably not going to have the success that he had with the Atlanta Falcons, but he's been pretty consistent over the last couple of weeks. He's had at least 10 fantasy points in 3 consecutive games. The Bengals have allowed the 7th most fantasy points to tight ends this season. So I think that Austin Hooper, this is one, if you haven't been starting him over the last couple of weeks, you got to start working him back into your lineup. And I want to go with a danger zone type player. I'm going to do a little bit of a throwback. And listen, go check the rankings, but let me just talk a little bit about Ian Thomas, who is the tight end 60 this season. So it hasn't been going well. The Saints have allowed the most fantasy points to tight ends this season, the 2nd most receiving yards per game to tight ends this season. I know it's an awful risk to go with Ian Thomas, and I'm not saying that you bench Hunter Henry or doing something ridiculous. But if you're looking for a tight end, and there's a lot of you missed out on Dallas Goedert or anything crazy like that, if you really need a deep sleeper at the tight end position, I know this is a secure start segment, so Visa, I apologize. But I still, listen, when it comes to finding these kind of tight ends, James Coe and I were the absolute best. And when we give you our guarantee, and it's going to be me. I'm not going to put James on this. He can later on Twitter if he wants to. But I'm going to go with Ian Thomas in some spots. And you can either join me or you can't. And I won't be offended if you don't want to. But I think that I got a feeling about him just based on the matchup.
I don't think that's terrible. I mean, I know the what we've seen this season is reason to maybe not have confidence, but I do think that it's not a bad play this week, especially if you're in a deeper league. Certainly, maybe if you want a DFS sort of outside the box play a little bit. I don't think that Ian Thomas' call is a terrible one this week. So I it's like a come with me if you want to live sort of thing. Like I'm totally down with that. I'm fine with that. Your defensive starts this week. Which ones are they?
Well, I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Chargers, and it hurts my heart. You know, you guys know that I support my friends down in Duval County. I watch AEW every week. I retweet Orange Cassidy all the time. Listen, but sometimes you got to make these business decisions. And the Jags have allowed 18 sacks this season. That's tied for the 5th most. They're turning the ball over an awful lot. And I love Gardner Minshew, but I think that there needs to be a full-on rebuild in Jacksonville. And I think that they're just good enough to get themselves out of the Trevor Lawrence situation, which is fine. They can draft an offensive lineman next year and be pretty good. By the way, I'm sorry, I know we were supposed to go tape to tape. Am I supposed to talk about the Bills as a team?
Sure. Yes.
Don't listen. Ryan, don't run the tape. I'm just going to say Bills are going up against the Jets. Let's cut some time. Bills, Jets, done. If somebody got mad and they rage dropped the Bills because of the thing against the Chiefs, I understand. You can start them this week against the Jets. Start them against Adam Gase. That's what we do.
And by the way, just as a side note, if you were sort of worried about Josh Allen, it's potentially a Josh Allen bounce back week too, because
100%.
Jets. There you go. That was Secure Starts presented by Visa. So we've done the starts. Now we got to do the sits. The quarterback. Who should we avert our gaze from this week?
Well, I'm going to start off with Jared Goff. For obvious reasons, he's going up against the Chicago Bears, who have been the toughest defense in the NFL this season. We saw last week, Teddy Bridgewater was pretty much doing whatever he wanted on the football field, and the Bears knocked him off of his game. You know what? And, you look at Goff, I will say this. I know that the statistics say he's had less than 15 fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3. Cooper Kupp dropped 2 touchdowns last week, one that led to a pick 6. Goff has been playing pretty well, but I just don't think that you can start him with this matchup. And I'm also worried about Drew Brees this week. He is currently the QB 20. He's had fewer than 16 fantasy points in 3 of 5 games. And the games that he's done well in, and I think about that Packers game, he was dumping the ball off to Alvin Kamara, who was doing all the dirty work. And he was just the benefactor of that. Or the beneficiary? No, the benefactor. Beneficiary? No, benefactor. Whatever. Somebody, grammar nerd, let me know. Carolina, though, has allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this season and the 4th fewest passing yards per game. They were pretty good against Nick Foles last week. So I'm going to sit Drew Brees. I think there's better options than Drew Brees. Don't go with the brand name all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, this has not been a just set it forget it year for Drew Brees. Running backs, the Bengals RB1 seems at the top of your list there, huh?
Yeah, he's had one good game this season, and everybody was like, I told you this guy's like, no, listen, we've seen enough of this. And he wasn't good earlier this year. He's played the Browns already. This is weird that this Browns-Bengals series is going to be over by week 7. But he had 46 rushing yards against them in week 2. And now this is like the sequel to a terrible movie we never asked for. Did you know there was a second Deuce Bigalow? European? Why did you make that second movie? Why am I going to start this player again? Why is he still on your roster? Why do you still think he's going to come through for you ever? But whatever, you have him. Listen, I don't have him on any of my teams, so it doesn't matter. Anyways, I did want to talk about Jerick McKinnon as well. We talked about JaMychal Hasty earlier in the show. I still think that would be the player that I would want to go with out of this 49ers backfield. And of course, this ends up being that Jerick McKinnon goes for 20 fantasy points. But I look at this matchup against the Patriots, and the names change for that defense each and every year, but they still just stop running backs. They've allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points to running backs this season.
Speaking of sequels, they're still making Trimmers sequels, like Michael Gross.
Stop it.
I guess
good for him.
I guess the Family Ties checks aren't rolling in quite as much, so he's still making Trimmers sequels. So that's a thing.
With Reba. Was Reba, she still doing it, or did she?
I think Reba tapped out. I think Reba tapped out on the. Yeah. She.
They had Fred Ward. Is he still doing it?
No, I think pretty much. I think Michael Gross is kind of the only one from the movie, original movies, still doing this thing.
They couldn't get Bacon in on that. What about Finn Carter? What is Finn Carter doing that she couldn't go back and make that movie? I don't know. By the way, I'm not going to give enough respect for knowing the name of that actress who was the lead in that movie. And you guys, you really should, because that was impressive.
That was very impressive because I had no idea. I was with you on Reba and Bacon. I never would have gotten.
And you can see, I have I'm not looking at a phone or anything.
No,
that just came
no.
top of mind.
That was like right off the dome. So that's very impressive. Which wide receivers are not going to be impressive this week?
I want to go to commercial because I thought that was that. No, by the way, let's talk about Tyler Lockett, who has not been playing very well since week 4. He's averaged just over 7 fantasy points per game. He's had fewer than 9 in back-to-back games. Arizona has been pretty good against opposing wide receivers this season. And I think what we're really seeing is the ascension of DK Metcalf. Like if this was a tag team, we would be at the point of DK Metcalf's career where he would super kick Tyler Lockett and throw him through the barbershop window as he's ready to become a fantasy superstar. And somebody who I thought was going to be a fantasy superstar was DJ Moore. And he's had 20 fantasy points in only 1 game this season, only 1 touchdown this season. And the matchup isn't great because the Saints have allowed the fewest receptions per game to wide receivers this season, just under 9. But watching him last week against the Bears, he dropped a lot of catchable passes. He had one that could have possibly put them in a position to tie that game and could not come up with it. So I just wasn't, that's it right there. That's a tough catch, but that's a catch an NFL receiver should be making. So until I see more out of him, pun not intended, but now in retrospect, pun intended, I can't start him.
It has been a frustrating year for DJ Moore. Robbie Anderson has pretty much come in and replaced him essentially in that offense. Didn't really see that one coming. Tight ends, who are you not big on this week?
Hayden Hurst. I know a lot of people were really excited about him coming into the season, hoping that he could kind of replicate what Austin Hooper had done with that team, but it just hasn't happened. He's had less than 5 targets in 4 consecutive games. He's averaging just under 10 fantasy points per game. And the Detroit Lions have allowed the second fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends this season. So I'm going to leave him on the bench. I've also got to leave Jared Cook on the bench, probably. Like, he also has scored less than 10 fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games. His average on the course of the season is less than 10 per game. And the Carolina Panthers have allowed the 5th fewest receiving yards per game to tight ends. I know Sunday, they gave up a touchdown to KMET, the mighty Met, but they've been pretty tough on tight ends this season.
Did you just refer to Cole Kmet as a radio station?
Dude, KMET. Yeah, that was a big station out here in Southern California. I'm an LA radio junkie. So when it's the mighty Met, when he was playing at Notre Dame, that's all I could talk about. My friends who are Chicago guys watching Notre Dame games be like, dude, KMET. His number should be 94 because it was 94.7. There'll be some there'll be some boomer out here who will be like, hey, I remember that station, bro. Used to listen because my sisters, who are much older than me, used to love that station. And I would listen to whatever heavy rock bands like Kiss and bands like that. So, yeah, there it is. That was too far. So don't start Jared Cook, I think is what I'm trying to say.
That's going to stick with me now for probably the rest of the season. Real quick, a couple of defenses for people to avoid this week.
Oh my gosh. I keep forgetting. We should do kickers, by the way. The fact that I can't, but Rodrigo Blankenship's on a bye, so it doesn't matter. I'm not starting the Broncos defense this week, and it should go without saying because they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs. So, of course, if you had picked them up in recent weeks and been playing them, you might want to get them back on your bench. Well, they were playing the Patriots last week, so you probably didn't have them. We also don't like the Houston Texans because apparently Bill O'Brien being fired was great for Deshaun Watson and the offense. The defense is like, they've known no difference. They're like, whatever. And now you got Aaron Rodgers, who was embarrassed. And even me, like, who thinks that Aaron Rodgers peaked in high school. He's going to go out there and put 40 points up on the Texans. So don't even think about it. Don't look at what the Buccaneers did last week and be like, dude, could they? No, they can't. They won't. Do not start the Houston Texans.
The Texans defense, it's similar to your argument about the Falcons offense. I mean, Bill O'Brien being let go, that did impact the offense because he was the play caller in the OC basically. Yeah. But just like Dirk Cutter is still there in Atlanta, that's going to impact the Falcons offense. The defensive coordinator side hasn't changed a whole lot in Houston. So That's not going to change that part of it either. For more of Adam Rank's starts and sits, you can check him out online at NFL.com/start-sit. You can get all of his picks for Week 7. We'll take a break, come back, and wrap up the show with some wiretaps on the NFL Fantasy Football Show presented by DraftKings. Have you been watching Fantasy Bites? Because you should be watching Fantasy Bites. It's our show with Adam Rank, Kimmy Checks, and Michael F. Florio. It airs on Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern. You can watch it on NFL.com, the NFL Fantasy app, and on YouTube at youtube.com/NFL Fantasy. Basically all the same places you watch this show. You can watch Fantasy Bites as well. It's been a lot of fun. They've been doing it every week. So if you haven't checked it out, you should go check it out. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you know what you're talking about on this week's show?
Oh, yeah. We're going to be talking a lot of the same things that we talk about here. What the impact of Clyde Edwards-Helaire and LeVeon Bell, that situation going on, and Tua and all this stuff. And anybody who watches this show, I will let you know that Ryan and Eddie Murphy have me constrained pretty well. I'm off the rails because our producer Hytham on that show has no control over me. So if you think I'm sort of unhinged here, like it's almost 30 minutes of me talking about The Rock and San Andreas with a little bit of fantasy football mixed in. No, I'm just kidding. It's a fun show. We got the rundown working on right now. We're gonna have some hype. We're gonna do a little bit of a hype train. I know we're kind of stealing your thing, Marcus. Maybe we should bring you on to do a little hype train stuff.
Okay,
as well. But I want Florio to hype up some players. I want him to get hype. I want him to spit some rhymes. Wearing a floral shirt and doing all that stuff, but that's neither here nor there. But please tune in.
Yeah,
that was
absolutely.
Probably not the best endorsement for it, but Kimmy's delightful, Florio's amazing, and then it's just, me. But the other two, awesome.
If you want more takes on San Andreas versus Skyscraper, it's the perfect place to go. There's no doubt about it. All right, so wiretaps, some guys that you may have gotten off the waiver wire this past week and whether or not you're going to start them this week. So first off, Tim Patrick, who's played very well the last couple of weeks for the Denver Broncos. He's got the Chiefs, whose defense has been pretty tough on wide receivers. But if you got Tim Patrick, would you give him a go?
I believe with some of the wide receivers that are on a bye this week, because we won't have Adam Thielen, we won't have Justin Jefferson. I know that's from two guys. Devontae Parker's not playing this week. So if you pick them up as a need type player, I'm not really scared of this matchup. I'm more worried about Jerry Jeudy because he hasn't consistently put up the points. Jerry Jeudy hasn't had more than 65 receiving yards in a game, whereas Tim Patrick, as you see right there, has consistently put up over 14 fantasy points. I do believe that he'll have a chance to get double digits in this one. The Chiefs are coming off a big win on a Monday night. They might have a little bit of a letdown, and now that Drew Lock is back, I actually don't hate starting Tim Patrick this week.
I feel like he's been more of the kind of do-it-all receiver. They get the ball to Jeudy, but I think they're using him very much as a deep threat to kind of stretch the field a little bit. Patrick's that guy who is kind of doing a lot of the dirty work there. So I think the targets are going to be there. The matchup's not great, but I think the target share sort of makes up for it. So that's the reason I consider giving him a start.
That's a great movie, by the way, Dirty Work.
Dirty Work? Oh, yeah.
With Norm Macdonald.
Norm Macdonald and Dave Chappelle? Absolutely.
Hey there, beard, all that stuff. Sorry.
Yeah. Keelan Cole, who very quietly is leading all the Jaguars receivers in fantasy points this year. He's got the Chargers. Again, maybe not the best matchup, but would you start Keelan Cole?
No, I think this matchup is okay. I think that they can be in a situation where they have to throw the ball an awful lot. And Keelan Cole has been the guy that we kind of wish that DJ Chark was going to be this season. He's been the most consistent guy. 15 fantasy points in you see right there, 2 straight games. So I do like it. I think this is a pretty good one. I got Gardner in a couple of spots. I've been rotating Gardner and Jared Goff in a lot of places, and this is my Gardner game going up against the Chargers. That defense should be better. I think they're going to get to the quarterback. Obviously, I have them as a start because they're going to get some sacks, but I think there's going to be a lot of situational throwing in that second half of that game. So I kind of like Keelan Cole this week as well.
I do too. I think he's a flex for me probably this week, but I think the opportunity is going to be there because the Chargers will put up some points. Here's the thing. The thing about Charger games is that they're always going to come down to the end. So it very well could be that, Gardner Minshew has the ball in his hands with a chance to sort of drive the Jaguars to a win at the end. But I think that works out well for Cole. I think he's going to get a chance to catch some passes. Last one, Teddy Bridgewater. You actually had Drew Brees as a sit. Not a surprise, considering the way the Panthers' pass defense has been. But the Saints' pass defense has not been great. Would you, if you picked up Teddy B, consider streaming him this week?
No, I would stream him. I think this is a pretty good opportunity for him. I know we don't really have that big a need at quarterback this week when you look at the buys. It's not like 2 weeks ago or when Rodgers was out or anything like that, and we had to really scramble for quarterback, even Justin Herbert being back. So I think with all that, a lot of us were probably only starting Kirk Cousins last week because a better quarterback was on a bye. So I'm not sure that you need to start Teddy Bridgewater, but if you do, I like the matchup. I have Teddy as one of my sits. I want to let you know that the matchup is good. I think, again, it's a revenge game. A Teddy B revenge game. You got to play him. So, yes, if you need a quarterback this week, for whatever reason, you had Ryan Fitzpatrick. I know a lot of people might have had Ryan Fitzpatrick. There's the guy. I knew there had to be one person. But, yeah, I think that I would play him. I would definitely put him on the plus side. I always try to look at, are you on the which side of the 15 are you? Are you a top 15 quarterback or a second 15 quarterback? I think he's a top 15 quarterback this week.
The Ryan Fitzpatrick scenario was the one that was in my head. If you had Fitz this week, if you've been starting him the last couple of weeks, then Teddy I think is an adequate replacement. Look, a couple weeks ago we suggested streaming him against the Falcons. He got you 20 points. He actually got you even more than that the week before against the Cardinals. So when the matchup is right, Teddy's not a bad quarterback to play. I didn't even think about the revenge game aspect of it. So stream Teddy Bridgewater. Stream Teddy Bridgewater this week. I think that's a pretty awesome play.
The only one that doesn't work for is Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm not starting him in his revenge game.
No, because I feel like Belichick's going to get the revenge on that side because that's just what he does. So, all right. In the meantime, for us, that is it. We are done. We appreciate you hanging out with the NFL Fantasy Football Show presented by DraftKings. You know the drill. Tell two friends to tell two friends. Rate, review, and remember, if you think air is free, you've never bought a bag of chips. Be safe. Take care of yourselves. Wear a mask, and we will see you on Friday.